Whelan, a former Marine, has been in a Russian prison for nearly 4 years now on espionage charges. The Biden administration has been facing criticism for not securing his release, along with Greiner. Meanwhile, that freed arms dealer, Viktor Bout, says he, quote, wholeheartedly supports Moscow's war on Ukraine. Speaking to Kremlin-controlled network RT, he said he would certainly go as a volunteer, his words, if he had the opportunity and the necessary skills. Bout was interviewed by Maria Butina, a Russian gun rights enthusiast turned TV personality who herself was previously jailed by the US on charges she was working as a foreign agent. I want to bring in Jill Doherty now. She is an adjunct professor at Georgetown University, a CNN contributor and actually former CNN Moscow bureau chief. She joins me from Washington, D.C. Always good to see you, Jill. Now, this was quite a sight to see Viktor Bout being interviewed by Maria Butina, herself once a US prisoner before going back to Russia. What did you make of the scene and the content of the interview?
Well, I mean, even the fact that it happened, it happened so quickly after he was out, after he got back from Moscow. Brittany Griner is still going through kind of reception at a military medical center, et cetera. So the fact that they put him on air very quickly, and then just, the setting, it looked very homey. They had curtains, kind of a snowy Russian scene. And then what he said, he's of course said that he had a portrait of Vladimir Putin in his jail cell because he's proud to be a Russian. That was one of the main things that he said. But he also was very critical of the prison, said it was Nazi inspired, and he criticized the food. Basically, he said he had hamburgers and overdone potatoes and chicken for the entire time that he was in the United States. But seriously, there were some bizarre things. Yeah. And I think they were the comments about life in the United States, about, he was really irate about LGBT plus. And he said that American school children are taught that there are 72 different genders, which I'm sure a lot of Americans would either laugh or be kind of surprised about. So, but substantively, he had the message down pat. He said, support the war. Well, maybe you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, no. I was going to ask you about that. I mean, the messaging and how controlled do you think the messaging was for both a domestic and international audience?
Well, I think that's a good question because it was balanced. I think this was really kind of more domestic than international. I mean, he's a supporter of Putin. He's back home. He is what they would argue an innocent businessman who was nabbed by the Americans because he's a Russian. So these are all messages for people at home. I think he immediately said, I do support the war. I'm questioning why it didn't happen earlier, was what he said. And then he would be a volunteer if he could, if the opportunity were there.
I wanted to ask you this too. What do you think his role will be going forward? Purely propaganda or some tangible role? Of course, he was, merchant of death, arms dealer, but he spent more than a decade in prison and probably doesn't have the same contacts and power that he once had. What do you see his role going forward?
Well, we really don't know, and I think that's one of the key questions. But he does have knowledge. Now, maybe the knowledge is a decade out of date. But he does have knowledge, and he was very effective at busting sanctions when he was involved in arms trading, which again, he denies, but there is proof of that. So that could be useful in terms of the war in Ukraine right now. Sanctions are a big issue, so his knowledge could be useful.
And of course, there's been political criticism in the US that this was far from a fair trade, merchant of death for a basketballer. It was interesting listening to Maria Butina. She was frankly gleeful in discussing that with Viktor Bout. How is the deal itself being portrayed in Russia?
As a big win for Vladimir Putin, number one. And then also there's a kind of an odd approach to it, which is, and this would all be in quotes, that the United States is such a depraved country that it would allow a trade for a basketball player and for an important person such as Victor Bout. Now, that is what the Russians want to say. But when you look at, Bout himself, he has to be important to Russia. So I think there was, they got somebody who's valuable, but in the United States, she was perceived as being valuable precisely because she is a very well-known sports person, and America wanted her back.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we'll see what the next deal brings and what he does next. Jill Doherty, always a pleasure. Thank you, Jill.